All right, we are going to get started. I just wanted to give people a minute or two after 8 to make sure that everybody was able to get on. We're going to talk today about the changing COVID-19 and the impact on life and reopening. For those of you that have not been on this call before and this webinar before, I want to thank you for attending. My name is Dr. Crowder. I'm also known as Dr. V. I've been an emergency medicine physician now for 30 years. And I've treated patients across 4 different pandemics. I'm going to be sharing today a lot of different information, and the references for this information, the original source documentation, is at the website AskDrV.us. You can also follow me on AskDrV_. All of these webinars are taped except for the Q&A. And then what happens is we upload it on the website. So if you ever want to go back and reference it, you can always go back to the website and actually listen to any component of this again. All right, so let's get started. The structure of the webinar is a slide presentation that's going to be 10 to 15 minutes long. We're going to be closer to 15 minutes today just because there's been some new information. And then that's followed by Q&A, which is 30 to 45 minutes. And normally we end right at about 9 o'clock. You could ask questions during the presentation, after the presentation is over. Everyone during the presentation is in listen mode. We take written questions in the chat box and in the Q&A first. So I take written questions first, and then depending upon the number of people that are on this call when we finish the presentation, we may be able to unmute some people and actually have a live Q&A. All right, so the intention for the webinar is for participants to be informed about COVID-19 science that will help them and their families stay healthy during this pandemic. The outcome is that you leave the webinar motivated to create or modify an action plan for yourself and your family, or you're motivated to create an action plan for your broader community. There's a lot of decisions, day-to-day decisions that have to be made during this COVID-19 pandemic, and we want to make sure that we're making the decisions with informed science. So in the first 99 days, it took 99 days for 1 million Americans to be infected with COVID-19. It took only 43 days for the second million cases to occur. It took 28 days for us to reach 3 million cases. And the 4th million case came, actually it was last week after only 14 days. So we're clearly progressing, and this infection is actually moving faster throughout our community. Today they announced that Herman Cain, who ran for president, died at the age of 74 from COVID-19. He is someone who did attend the Trump Tulsa rally without a mask. So how do I know if I or my family have COVID-19? So the diagnosis is made by a couple of things. One, there's a PCR testing. There's antigen testing, which is different from antibody testing. So antigen testing. And then there's CAT scan findings. So let's talk about this for a little bit. The PCR testing actually detects the genetic material of the virus. It's done by a swab of your nasopharyngeal area, nose, or saliva. It's most accurate 8 days after the exposure. It can be inaccurate if it's administered too soon or too late. So if you get the PCR test too early, let's say maybe you just had an exposure 2 or 3 days ago, or you get the PCR test 2 weeks after an exposure, those two situations will give you what we call a false negative rate, where they'll say that it's negative, but it's really positive. So then there's the antigen test. This actually detects proteins on the surface of the virus. Some people call this the rapid test. This also has false negatives about 20 to 30% of the time. So if the test is positive, you know that it's true. You actually have COVID-19. But if it's negative, you actually really need another one. So with both of these tests, whether in the hospital setting, we actually get 2 tests that are negative before we determine that someone's actually negative. This actually just is a study Johns Hopkins did on the PCR test. And again, they found a false negative rate. False negative rate means that the test was negative when the person actually had COVID-19, at least 20% of the time. One of the best ways to actually diagnose coronavirus, which is not really talked about that much in the news, is the CAT scan. So a lot of times if we get a negative test, but we really think the patient has it, we will order a CAT scan. And you see what they call a ground glass appearance on a CAT scan that of a patient that is COVID-19 positive. And the COVID-19 infection is really about the only thing that actually causes this appearance. So it's pretty, when you see it, you really know you're dealing with COVID-19 and not something else. All right, so now there's been a lot about going back to school, and I want to actually talk about the Lancet Pediatric COVID study. This is the largest study of COVID-19 in children and the impact of COVID-19 on children. So this was a multi-center study in Europe. It looked at 82 healthcare institutions across 25 European countries. They looked at 582 confirmed pediatric COVID patients that aged from 3 days to 18 years old, with the average age being 5 years old. So 75% of the children with known COVID had no pre-existing health conditions. They were healthy children. So that is a very, very, very important point. Now, about 65% of the patients had a fever, which means that 35% of them did not have a fever. URI is upper respiratory tract illness, either a runny nose or a cough. That was about 54% of them. Then about 22% of them had nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, did not have any respiratory symptoms. 28% of them only had a headache. And then 25% of them had the lower respiratory symptoms like wheezing and coughing, etc. In children, you can also see what we call COVID toes. It's a discoloration. It makes the toes look like they're frostbitten. It's very common to see this in younger adults or in children, but this also is, we also tell parents, if you see this, please do not bring the child into an office setting or emergency department because they most likely have COVID. So what was the outcome with the children? Well, 62% of the COVID positive children required hospitalization, 8% required ICU admission, 4% required ventilatory support, 3% required what we call inotropic support, which is basically they had a very low blood pressure and we had to give them medications to get their blood pressure up. And then 0.7% of these patients died. So they looked at what was the risk factors for worse outcomes. One is that anybody less than 1 month old, so the very, very young. Also male sex. So boys were more likely to get the disease and more likely not to do well with it. If you presented with respiratory symptoms rather than GI symptoms, you were more likely to have a bad course, and any sort of co-infection. So either you had influenza, RSV, strep, any other sort of infection that you had on top of COVID. So there were several situations like that. They did not investigate the impact of obesity. And obesity is known to be a risk factor because obesity is an inflammatory state. So I would suspect that in the US, we would have results that would be worse than the results in this particular study because of our childhood obesity epidemic. Now, where did they get the source? Where did they get the infection from? 56% of them got it from a parent, 4% of them got it from a sibling, and 40% of them got it from an unknown source or someone outside the household. All right, so we've talked a lot about respecting COVID-19. It's a droplet disease, but it also is airborne. It stays on cardboard and plastic surfaces for long periods of time. It's highly contagious. A minimum time of exposure to infect others is 45 seconds. If you have 100 people, 60 to 80 of those people who come into contact with someone with COVID-19 will actually become COVID positive. This is much different than influenza. So influenza, maybe 30 or 40 people will who come into contact out of 100 will turn positive. So it's much more infectious. As we've said, the initial recommendations was that it was just a droplet disease, but we're actually seeing that COVID-19 is airborne or can be airborne. The difference between droplet and airborne is basically how far they drop from the person. So droplets are 3 feet or less. Airborne can actually be much longer. This just shows an example. Ebola is a droplet disease. This is how come the initial recommendations were for us to stay 3 feet apart. And now the initial recommendations are for us to stay 6 feet or farther. Is because we've now realized that there are components of this disease that actually are airborne and that is not just a droplet disease. Now, basically, we're not sure if the virus is breaking up into micro droplets that then are acting like an airborne disease and are still infectious, or whether or not they're becoming aerosolized by heavy breathing or certain actions. We know that sort of singing, instruments, heavy breathing like a workout class are associated with it becoming aerosolized. The other thing that causes it to become aerosolized is home nebulizers. This is actually really, really important. If you have a home nebulizer for a child or an adult with asthma, you cannot tell the difference between an asthma attack and a COVID-19 attack. So it is very important that any sort of home nebulizer machine is not used at all in the household. You could use it outside on a deck. You could use it maybe in a garage with the door open, or you can actually, if it's a child or an adult, you could use an inhaler with a spacer, which is actually shown here in the picture to the right. They have masks that you can use for younger children, but in the emergency department and in the hospital, we do not use nebulizers at all. We're not even using them in the ICU because it will infect the entire hospital. So I think it's really, really important with people who have home nebulizers that they know that they cannot use these in the home at all during this pandemic. All right, so COVID, there's been basically 6 clusters of infections that have actually been identified. Those 6 clusters are cluster 1, which is flu-like with no fever. Cluster 2 is flu-like with a fever. Cluster 3, as I said, was more GI symptoms, diarrhea, vomiting, loss of smell or taste. Cluster 4 is basically cluster 1, but with a lot of fatigue. Cluster 5 also has associated with confusion, and cluster 6 has abdominal pain and respiratory symptoms combined. So what we have found is that the patients that actually don't do well are the ones that are actually in cluster 4, 5, and 6. So if there's fatigue, confusion, or a combination of respiratory and abdominal symptoms, those patients actually don't do as well and often require admission and may require ventilatory support. All right, this gentleman here is Peter Zai, and he is the inventor of the N95 mask. He has come out of retirement to sort of help us in the midst of COVID-19. And basically, so that everybody understands, what he actually did was he actually created and has a patent for the electrostatically charged fabric that is on the outside of the mask. So this mask attracts the particles of COVID-19 like a magnet. And that is why it's so important not to touch the outside of your mask. You want to always work with your mask using the ear loops. So basically, his recommendation is to have 7 masks and 1 mask essentially for each day of the week. And then you hang them up after you use them for 1 day. And then you actually rotate them. So your Monday mask is your Monday mask, your Tuesday mask is your Tuesday mask, and then you actually rotate them. Some of these masks, depending upon how they are made, that you purchase, are made for multiple usage. You have to kind of read the packaging to see if it's a one-time or a multiple usage package. But I have seen masks that you can use up to 20 times. So there's been a lot of talk about the different masks, N95, KN95, N99, P100. Let's talk about the difference. So the N95 masks are the US standard mask for respirator mask. The KN95 is a Chinese standard for mask. So that is really the only difference. The KN95 is the Chinese standard, the N95 is a US standard, but both of them actually block 95% of the particulate matter. N100s are face piece respirator filters where they actually block out 99.97 of the particles. P100 masks are the highest level of protection, and they block out 99.9% of particles that are 3 microns or larger. This actually just shows you what the N95 masks look like. Some of them look different than this, but this is just a sampling of them. This is the N99 respirator mask. This is what the N100 mask look like. And this is the P100 respirator mask. These purple things on the side are cartridges with filters, and those filters can be screwed off and then changed. So you probably wear a face mask. It's very important that it goes over the bridge of your nose and underneath your chin. And it should be loose enough so that it stays securely in place with talking and you actually don't have to move it. So I see some people on the news where their face mask is kind of dropping down and they constantly are pulling it back up, and they're usually touching the outside of their mask. You want to make sure that you can talk with your mask and it's not really irritating. And you want to make sure that you're not actually touching your face or touching the outside of the mask. So for properly using the mask, you want to wash your hands before and after touching it. Only actually touch it with the earpiece or the tie bands. Make sure it covers the areas of your nose, mouth, and chin, and that you can breathe comfortably in it. If it is something that is like a fabric, you want to actually have a 100% cotton fabric that is at least 3 ply, and then those can be washed. Now, you want to make sure that you don't touch the outside of your mask or anyone else's mask. You don't want to wear the mask underneath your chin. You don't want to leave your nose or mouth uncovered, and you don't want to remove the mask while around others. And let me also say this, some people, you don't want to make sure that if you breathe or cough that you're breathing or coughing or sneezing into the mask. I've seen some people where they take the mask down to sneeze, and that kind of defeats the purpose. And then obviously you don't want to share your mask with anyone. So key points are filtering 100% of the incoming air. If you're actually making a mask, you want to have layered fabric. As I said, 100% cotton and a minimum of 3 layers. You want to have a proper fit and size. It's also important because men are more likely to get this disease and they're more likely to not do well with it, to actually try to eliminate as much facial hair. Facial hair leads to the mask not fitting as well and having more opportunities for the virus to get in. You want it to be comfortable and have a metal bend piece around your nose. Now, I've had a lot of questions about face shields, and people have been asking whether or not face shields actually protect you like a mask. And they did a study in Switzerland, and basically they do not. So if you're going to actually use a face shield, you would use a face shield in combination with your mask. We've also seen some masks where they have a face shield kind of attached to the top of the mask. Now, what difference does it make if you wear a mask? So it depends upon who actually is a healthy person and who actually has COVID. So in real life, we don't know who's who. But for the purpose of this discussion, we're going to make the person on the left be the COVID carrier and the person on the right is a healthy person. So if the healthy person has on the mask, the probability of transmission is 70%. If the COVID positive person has on the mask and the healthy person does not, then the transmission probability is 5%. If both people have on a mask, then the transmission probability is 1.5%. What's important about this is when you're wearing a mask for other people, and when other people wear a mask, they're wearing a mask for you. Lastly, I just want to talk, I know there's been a lot of talk about COVID deaths, but there's not been a lot of talk about the long-term effects of COVID-19. And there a lot of folks who are recovering are experiencing a lot of disability. And so there's a thing called post-intensive care syndrome, which is cognitive, mental, or physical impairment. 75% of COVID patients that make it out of the ICU have some form of post-intensive care syndrome. It's usually in the form of renal failure requiring dialysis or transplant. It could be in the form of limb amputations. Nick Cordero, the Broadway actor, had to have his limbs amputated prior to dying from COVID. Also, it can be strokes. About 47 to 58% of young people who have strokes cannot return to work. And then lastly, we're seeing a lot of pulmonary fibrosis, pulmonary scarring, decreased lung capacity. So about a third of these people are actually having problems with normal activities like walking a block or cleaning house because of shortness of breath with daily activities as a result of long-term effects of COVID. Okay, now we're going to talk about the vaccine process. These are basically all the different stages. Exploratory, where you try to figure out how the vaccine works. Preclinical, where we test it on animals. And then various clinical development, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Phase 1 is where you do it with a small group of people just to determine that it's safe. Phase 2, you increase the number of participants, usually to the hundreds, and do a randomized trial. And then phase 3, you do thousands of people, and currently they're doing 30,000 to determine if it works and also safety. Then there's a regulatory review and approval process. There's manufacturing, quality control, and then lastly, distribution. So we were able to get a jump start on this particular infection because of SARS. And SARS and COVID-19 are both coronaviruses. So because of the work with SARS, there had already been exploratory phase as well as some preclinical phase work. So that's how come we're able, I know the process doesn't seem fast, but it's actually faster than normal for vaccines coming out. So where are we with that? So Moderna actually started phase 3 this week. Their goal is to actually recruit 30,000 volunteers for their phase 3 trial. The vaccine is a 2-part vaccine that has to be administered 28 days apart from each other. So you can just, it's going to take them a month or two to get 30,000 people. Then you've got to actually wait a month and give them the second dose. So we will probably get results on this sometime around in December, January timeframe. Shortly thereafter, Pfizer also announced that they were actually within 12 hours. Pfizer said, well, we're starting phase 3 as well. Pfizer and BioNTech, they actually have 4 vaccines that they are actually entering into phase 3. And then there's also a vaccine from Oxford and AstraZeneca. They're not releasing quite as much information, so I don't know necessarily if they're in phase 3 or not, but I know they're at least in phase 2. All right. So now, the fact that COVID-19 is airborne has huge implications for movies, churches, gyms, office spaces, and schools. So quickly going through this, movie theaters are basically, there's no way you should go to a movie theater until COVID-19 is over. It's just too long to sit in a enclosed space with no windows. Similarly for the church, and the thing about the church that actually makes it particularly dangerous is the singing, any instruments like flute, clarinet, trumpet, saxophone, and also the call and response with the pastor and the church audience. Those are things that will aerosolize COVID-19. Gyms have also been found to be a very important source of COVID-19 infections. They are taking a lot of precautions. Some folks are putting up dividers between ellipticals and treadmills, and even creating enclosed places to work out. I think it's really probably better to just work out outside if you can. That would really be the best. Office spaces, another area where it's very shared space. So if you have a large office building, you have to remember that you're sharing the ventilation with all the people in that building. So if something is airborne, that is going to be problematic. They did a testing of AC compressors, and 25% of them that they sampled in a random sample had RNA from COVID-19 on the blades. Now, school reopenings. First, this actually shows a picture of school reopenings in South Korea. South Korea and other countries, Denmark and Taiwan, all other sorts of countries, anywhere in Europe that have opened up schools, have done so with far less of a community transmission rate than we have. So there's been no attempt to open up schools with as high of an infection rate as we have. But I do want to talk about what some schools could do. So one is, it's important to know what zone are you in, okay? So the zones are split by color: green, yellow, and red. Red zones have the highest infection rate. That's more than 100 infections per 100,000 people. And they have a diagnostic test positivity rate, which means if I administered 100 tests, how many of them were positive? So with a greater than 10%, that means I administer 100 tests and more than 10 of them turn positive. Yellow zones are 10 per 100,000 with a diagnostic positivity rate of 5 to 10. And the green zones are less than 10 per 100,000 and less than 5% diagnostic positivity rate. Now, what is important is that if you're in a red zone, there's some red zones that I would call a super duper red zone. So when they say they have more than 100 cases per 100,000, they actually may have 500 cases per 100,000, right? They may have a diagnostic test positivity rate that is not just 10 or 15%, but it may be 30 or 40%, right? So it's very important, and this is determined by county. So the Coronavirus Task Force did a report as of July 17th. I have the report on my website. You can actually look up your state and look up your county and see if you are in a green, yellow, or red zone. That's very, very important. Then once you know what zone you're in, then you can get into what are all the other considerations that you actually did take around education, nutrition, special populations, athletics, mental health, group size, etc. Right? This is a document that the American Academy of Pediatrics for school reopenings put together. This is also on the website. So considerations for going back to school. One is, what is the infection rate of my community? Two is, what is the age of my child? Is my child mature enough to actually follow instructions? And then three is, what is the age or conditions of other people living in the home? So do we live in a multi-generational home with an uncle or an aunt or a grandmother? Or is it just a young family with young children? So those are all things to sort of consider. Basically, what other countries have done outside of decrease the infection rate is decrease class size, move the desk apart 6 feet with barriers, remove all public water fountains, provide PPE for teachers, administrators, and staff, as well as 2 weeks off so that anyone can quarantine safely. More frequent cleaning of the rooms, offices, and buses, installation of cleaning stations, and temperature testing. This is just some of the things that they've done. There's really an exhaustive list. I believe that also for our community, we really need to have testing and tracing in place that you can get easily, right? So you can easily get 2 tests and figure out if your child is positive or negative. I know about a month ago, people asked me when I thought we would need to lock down. I said it would be right around the middle of July to the middle of August. This came out today. 13 states, according to Harvard coronavirus experts, need to lock down. When we're talking about red zone, that's places that have more than 10 per 100,000 in daily new cases, right? I mean, more than 100 per 100,000, more than 100 per 100,000. So Florida has 48 new cases daily. So they definitely have more than 100 per 100,000 because they would get that in 2 days. Mississippi 43, Louisiana 46, Alabama 39. You can just see all of these. These are very, very high infection rates. And these are new cases every day. All right, the Texas Medical Association put together this COVID risk chart, which I actually really like. 9 is something that's high risk, and 1 is something that's very low risk. So 9 are things like working out, going to a bar or going to a sports stadium. 8 would be eating at a buffet or working out at a gym or going to an amusement park. 6 would be sending the kids to school, working a week in an office, going to a public swimming pool. 5 is having dinner at someone else's house, attending a backyard barbecue with other people that you're not actually isolating with, or going to the beach or shopping at a mall. 4 is staying at a hotel for 2 nights, going to a library, eating at a restaurant outside. 3 is grocery shopping, walking, running, riding a bike with others, playing golf. 2 is getting takeout, pumping gas and playing tennis. And 1 is opening the mail. All right, so little good news. This is a home COVID test that is being tested in Australia. Basically, you spit into that little area and it tells you whether or not you're positive instantaneously, almost like checking your blood sugar at home if you have diabetes. This test is very cost effective. It is basically, I think, less than $5 or so. They've been using it for people to actually run the test, and then they bring the strip if they want to go to a Broadway show or the movies or something like that. In the UK, they've been having airport sniffing dogs that detect COVID-19. These dogs have been doing a very, very good job. And this eliminates the need for, or could eliminate the need for very expensive testing, where you can just actually have dogs sniff people who are traveling and determine who is COVID positive and who potentially needs a COVID test. So these airport sniffing dogs have actually been very, very accurate. This is just a reminder, and I remind people of this. Sometimes we're distracted by the shiny object. The shiny object right now is COVID-19, but I just remind people to make sure to still actually go and get all of your regular screenings, your yearly mammograms or pap smears or prostate tests or your smoker chest x-rays or colonoscopies. You want to really make sure that you're doing all the things that you're normally doing to sort of take care of yourself and stay healthy. All right, we are going to move over now to Q&A. So if you have any questions, you want to start putting them in the chat box. I'm going to just take a minute here and actually stop the broadcast and put on the video. All righty, there we go. All righty. All right, so if you have any questions, what I'd like for you to do is type it in the chat box or type it into the Q&A. And while people are doing that, I am going to unmute my father because I actually got very important news today. And I asked my father to actually be on this. George Crowder, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, yes.
All right, there we go. All right, okay. So I want to share, while people are putting their questions in the chat box and the Q&A box, I want to share a little bit about what we had talked about. So I live in Washington, D.C., and I was intending upon going home to New York to visit my parents right around the middle of August. And so my father called me and informed me about new rules in New York. So you want to tell everybody about the new rules in New York, Dad?
Well, the New York rules are really tri-state. They're really supposed to be New York, New Jersey, and I think Connecticut, okay?
Okay.
And the rule is that you must register if you come into New York and isolate yourself for 14 days, okay? If you don't if you don't register, you will be fined $2,000. Everybody at the airport are given a form to register, okay? And if you're driving, you are expected and by law to register within a day.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And you have to quarantine for 14 days.
And you have to quarantine yourself for 2 days. And the
for 14 days. Wait, for 14 days, right?
Yeah.
Right, for 14 days. And neighbors can turn you in.
Neighbors can turn you in.
Right. So there are people who are flying, or you can't even get out of the airport in New York without actually completing this registration form. There are people that are going to New York and thought they were going to New York for just a couple of days and now are stuck for 14 days. I actually am not going to go because I'd have to, in order to visit my parents, I'd have to go to a hotel for 14 days and quarantine before I could then come to their house and visit them. So my little vacation, which I've been being safe and my parents have been being safe, just got canceled. So can you see it all? Do you see any evidence? Do you know people, Dad, who've been impacted by this?
Well,
other than ourselves?
I know one lady that she really inherited a piece of property in New York. I know her through my neighbor's friend, and she came up to clean out to really to look over the property and take care. She is registered now, and she's stuck there for 14 days, and the tracers are calling her every day to make sure she's in place.
Right. All righty. Thank you very much. You can go back on mute. I just wanted to share, this was new information about what New York was actually doing.
But also, I should tell anybody thinking about it, the isolation of the quarantine process in New York, I just went and looked at it. It is really involved. Somebody is thinking about doing it. Yeah, you should look at it, really is. It's just not staying at a hotel. It's really involved in what to meet those requirements.
Right. Mm-hmm. All right. So, all right. I had someone who wants me to put the symptom list back up. Why don't I do that at the very end at 8:55, because I can't actually do that and actually take questions. But I will go back to that slide at the very, very end. Okay, hold on. Hold on just a second. Normally I have Holly who helps me with this, but she is actually dealing with a family emergency. So, Manju, you have your hand raised. Hold on a second. I will, let me get to you and see if I can unmute you. Okay, Manju, you can unmute.
Hi there.
Hi.
Clarify, and I apologize if I missed earlier from your dad, because in Ohio, we have the same travel, but I didn't hear that they're doing a fine, which I'm all for it, since Ohio was being watched nationally. So how are they, I guess, and I apologize again if I missed it, when he was saying, so obviously if you're traveling into New York, you have to self-quarantine for 14 days, but how realistically are they keeping track, or how can they keep track of everyone who's coming in and out of the state to know if they're really quarantining?
Yeah, so what he was saying was that if they actually fly in, you cannot actually get out of the airport without actually registering a form with all of your contact information, your name, I don't know if they're asking for a copy of your driver's license, but you have to provide all this information on a registration form before you leave the airport. Driving from state to state, they are actually, there's no one stopping people at the state line or anything like that. So they are asking people to actually self-quarantine for 14 days, and they're asking neighbors and friends and people, if they see something that they think the person didn't do it, to actually report them and call them in.
I got you. Okay, because there's the people who are saying for us too, like, how do they really know in Ohio? I was like, I don't know, but I guarantee you if it gets to the point, they'll do something where they're knowing who's coming in and out. You know, and
Yeah, I think the main thing for I think this was really directed at Florida because there's a lot of airport traffic between New York and Florida. Right?
I got you.
So I think this probably was really directed at that. But I think that this is part of the problem with having a state-run system as opposed to a federal mandate, right?
I got
So
you.
you've got to have a federal mandate because there's too much going back and forth between the state lines. It's not controlled.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah.
Me.
All right. All right. All righty. Anybody else have a question? If so, put it in the chat or the Q&A. Okay, we've got, you know what, Ron? I would love your assistance with managing questions. Hold on just a second. All righty, great. All right, Ron, Dr. Charles, you are unmuted. Okay, great, thank you. And if you could also help with the controls, that would be helpful. Okay, do we have any more questions? You can raise your digital hand. You can put it in the chat, or you can actually put it in the Q&A. And I have not forgotten about the person that wants the screenshot. Oh, there was also a question that I had gotten around a particular tea that was called Anumara Ari, and the person was asking if it was helpful with COVID-19. I was not able to find any research on that related to COVID-19. So that doesn't mean it works or doesn't work. It just means there's no research. There's no research on it. I have, though, obviously, we have a lot of research on the vitamin D and the zinc. All right. Any other questions? If so, put them in the Q&A or the chat box, or raise your digital hand. Now, let me ask you this. Does everybody on here know if they're in a red zone, yellow zone, or green zone? Is there anybody that doesn't know where their county, what if their county is in a red, green, or yellow zone? All righty, everybody seems to know. All righty, so what I'm going to do then for just a second is I'm going to put the clusters of symptoms back up. Hold on just a second. Ron, I'm going to do a screen share. If you can just confirm that everybody can actually see the screen share.
Yes, I can see it, so I presume everybody else can.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. All right, the cluster of symptoms are, oh, there we go. All right. These are the 6 different clusters of symptoms. So almost all of them have headache and loss of smell. So that's really not the distinguishing feature because all 6 clusters have headache and loss of smell. The distinguishing feature is cluster 1 does not have a fever. Cluster 2 does have a fever. And then cluster 3 is vomiting, diarrhea, may have chest pain. 4 is basically 1 with fatigue. And then 5 is the same as essentially 2 with some confusion and muscle pain. And then cluster 6 is basically the GI symptoms, the respiratory symptoms, the fever, fatigue, everything sort of all together.
So Valda,
We
have a couple questions from the chat box.
Okay, go ahead. You
I'm
want to
coming
read them
at
all
the
for
chat
me?
box Q&A. So one is, one was referring to the question you asked about the zones,
Yes.
what zone you're in. And the person said, no, they didn't. And how do we check?
Okay. So what state are they in? What state and what county? I'm going to show you how to check right now.
Laya, do you want to let us know what state you're in? Or in county?
And what I'm going to do is, oh, I thought I had this on my website. Hold on just a second.
So I'm waiting on her to provide for her area. Somebody else asked a question, what zone is DC?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, Laya came back to us. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. She said she's in PG County, Fort Washington. So if you could look, if you could bring it up, then we can look at PG County, Fort Washington, and DC.
All right. Let me show.
And shout out to Mr. Crowder.
All righty. Let me pull this. I've got to pull this up. Let me see. I've got this somewhere. All right. Let me actually pull this up. Hold on just a second. I am.
So while you're doing that, there was another question, and it was, do you have any information on the story about doctors from Texas talking about hydroxychloroquine?
Yes.
And them being silenced, and was that fake news?
Yes. So one is yeah, there's a couple of things around that. Is that one is that I haven't gotten all of the doctors' names from that. So one is hydroxychloroquine has been studied, and they actually revoked their emergency. They actually revoked their emergency approval because the research actually showed that that hydroxychloroquine did not have a benefit, and in some cases it actually was harmful. Now that was using it in a inpatient setting. Some places are still studying it in an outpatient setting, but in an inpatient setting, it was not found to actually be helpful. They also, those group of physicians, and the only one that had a name to her was the African American woman that was from Nigeria. She went to medical school in Nigeria. She has a kind of very sordid past around saying things are very kind of a conflation of healthcare and religion with, philosophies around demons and things, which is very unusual. And so, no, I think it was done basically to try to, I think they're going to throw anything at the wall to try to get people to think this is over, basically. And it's not over. And there's no cure. And if there was a cure, we would know about it. and we don't. So, all righty. So I was asked about Maryland and the District of Columbia. Okay. So the District of Columbia, again, this is for the week of July 14th. So the District of Columbia was considered a yellow zone, with the Washington, Arlington, Alexandria area also being considered a yellow zone. Now, let me go back and actually look at Maryland. So, Maryland.
PG County, Fort Washington.
Yeah. Okay. Maryland. Okay, here's Maryland. Prince George's County and Montgomery County are all, and even Baltimore City were yellow zones. Now this is as of July 14th, 2020. Okay. Anybody else want me to look up anything before we? They're not
Just
sure
as an exercise, you can look up Wayne County, Michigan.
Okay, great. I'm already in the M's. So Michigan is right here. Now, here's the thing about this particular, let me tell you, this is the other thing about this particular report that was kind of concerning to me. They don't list all of the counties. So I'm to assume that the counties that are not listed are in the green zone. Mm-hmm. So here's Michigan, and Wayne County is not listed, which would then lead me to believe that Wayne County is in the green zone. But they don't explicitly actually say that, which they should. So it leads you to believe that all the counties have not been looked at. Now here is, so I'm just telling you, that is one of the problems with this document. Like, it should have green column, which then has all of the counties for the state.
Agreed.
But instead, what it does is it just lists your yellow and your green zones. So I believe Wayne County was probably green. Anybody else?
There's another question in the Q&A.
Certainly. Wait. Anybody want to look up their county before I actually take the screen share off?
Oh, we have one from the chat. How about Fairfax County, Virginia?
Virginia. All right, Fairfax County, Virginia, yellow zone. It's interesting, all the places in Virginia that are in the red. Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Suffolk County, Manassas, Galix, Martinsville, but Fairfax is yellow. Okay, great. I'm gonna actually turn the screen share off.
Oh, wait a minute.
Okay, go ahead.
I got another let's see, from the chat box. Let's see. Oh. Let's see. Hold on, just what about I had a couple more.
Okay, go ahead.
Hillsborough County, Florida.
Okay. Okay, Hillsborough County, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Hillsborough's in the red.
Okay, and then Henry and DeKalb County, Georgia.
Okay.
And you might want to share the website where you got that information from, because there was a couple of questions.
Yeah. Yeah, DeKalb County is red. Henry County. Henry County is not on here. So I'm to assume Henry County is green. You said Henry County, right? In Georgia?
Correct.
Yeah. Henry County is not on here.
So DeKalb is red and
And
Henry.
DeKalb is red and Henry is green.
Okay. All right. Another couple questions, one from the chat box and one from the Q&A.
Okay, then I'm gonna actually close this.
Okay.
Okay, all right, there we go.
Okay. Heard that we may need to wear goggles should the virus escalate. Do you agree?
That is a possibility. That is a possibility. I think that, again, you know, it's those places that are like the super red zones, where the infection rates are really, really high. I think that is a possibility for certain areas, yes.
Because there has been transmission through the eyes, unfortunately.
Through the eyes, yes. There was, you know what, I'm gonna actually add, Gary had gotten us a mask that includes a visor that's attached to it, and I will actually show where that is and how to get that next week.
All right, and as a parent, how to decide if it's safe for kids to go back to school?
Yeah, so if you're in a red zone, it's not safe unless your government does a mandatory lockdown for 30, 60 days. So if you're in a red zone, I can tell you right now, it is not safe, right? Now, if they do a 30 to 60 day lockdown and demonstrate that their infection rates are significantly lower, more like a green or yellow zone, then you can go back safely if you have easy access to testing, if they're contract tracing, if they're doing temperature checks, if they're decreasing the classroom size, putting those dividers up that I showed you, closing all the public water fountains, like all of those things actually have to be done, right? There can't be any choir practice or band practice or contact sports. Anything like that. Right. Oh, that's right. Okay, Jurix.com. Thank you, Gary. He just put it in the chat for everyone. Actually, he put it in the chat, but you know what, Gary, you put it in the chat for only the panelists. So let's switch it and put it in for everyone. Okay.
And then there's another question. I
just want to be really, I just want to be really clear that that's why it's so important to actually know if you're in a red zone or not, right? And so that's why it's so important. So, and certain areas, again, this was 2 weeks ago. So certain areas have gone from yellow to red in the evolving time period. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay, and then the next one is there an additional level to the red level, meaning county is in the red zone as well as on the watch list?
Yeah, so, well now, what is the watch list? What does she mean by the watch list?
That came from Manju.
Oh, you mean the watch list, like not able to travel in certain areas. So no, there should be different levels in the red zone because some places are super duper red, right? And so it's really like a red zone is diagnostic positivity rate of more than 10%, right? There's some counties in Texas that are over 50%, right? So yeah, I think that there are some areas where they needed to kind of make distinctions within that red zone, but really because there are some places that are worse than others inside that red zone, but they did not make those distinctions.
I'm looking to make sure. Oh, can you also put the location / website we can go to check zone colors? That's a question.
Yeah. Yep, I'll put that in there. It's public integrity. And I will make sure, I thought it was on our website, but it is not. And I will get that on our website as well. Publicintegrity.org. All right, I just sent that out on the chat.
Yeah. Great. I
All right.
don't, I'm looking to see if we have any more. I don't think we have any more questions, and we're at 9:02.
All righty. All righty. Great, great, great. All right. So I want to thank everybody really for coming this evening. I really appreciate everybody getting on the website. I hope this was really helpful. I will continue to update this. This is the go-to place at 8 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're going to be in this probably until the end of the year, and things are going to always be evolving. Feel free to actually send me any questions by email in between Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I will make sure that I add a slide related to the answer. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thanks, Ron, for hosting for me.
Oh, no problem.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.